Welcome to Historical Stories channel. The most ancient period of Pharaonic Egypt is usually divided into two, namely the early dynastic period and the pre-dynastic period. Our story today goes back to this pre-dynastic era. So let's start our journey together. Welcome to my channel, your virtual museum guide. I make videos about ancient archaeological findings and historical tales. Before we start, please subscribe for more updates. As with everything related to Egypt, there are many theories about when exactly the pre-dynastic period began. Most scholars agree it started sometime between 6000 and 5000 BC. However, some believe that the pre-dynastic period lasted from 7000 to 4000 BC. The pre-dynastic period in general refers to the time before the first pharaohs appeared, so before King Minos, the first king of the first dynasty, who reigned from around 3200 to 3000 BC. This means that the pre-dynastic period may have lasted for thousands of years. However, despite the lack of exact dates, historians and archaeologists know quite a lot about this time. In fact, they have managed to divide the pre-dynastic period into three subcategories, namely the early pre-dynastic period, the middle pre-dynastic period, and the late pre-dynastic period. The reason they did this is because there were significant cultural changes that happened during this period which set them apart from each other. For example, the way people buried their dead changed over time. Along with this, new skills developed such as pottery making and new tools were used. And of course, all these changes happened gradually. Therefore, dividing them into subcategories made studying this period much easier. The end of the pre-dynastic period is considered to be around 3100 BC, which marks the beginning of the early dynastic period. This is the time when Egypt was unified under one ruler, thus ending the period of many small kingdoms ruled by nomarchs. What's interesting is that Egypt has records of this unification dating back to the 4th dynasty. So we have records of the events that marked the end of the pre-dynastic period, but nothing about how the Egyptians lived before that. The earliest piece of evidence we have of organized settlements in Egypt dates back to around 4000 BC. We find those remains in the city of Hierakonpolis. Hierakonpolis was an important city during the pre-dynastic and the early dynastic periods. It was located in Upper Egypt, south of Abydos and north of the first cataract of the Nile. This settlement was probably ruled by a local chieftain or nomarch. They found several administrative areas along with a large residential area. From the architecture, archaeologists believe that the residents of Hierakonpolis came from many different regions. Also, Hierakonpolis was one of the largest cities of its time in Egypt. They found several small villages near the city, which indicates that its population was quite large. Its strategic location on the Nile must have contributed significantly to its prosperity. It is believed that the first capital of Egypt was also established here. One of the most prominent buildings in the city is a large complex of interconnected buildings that probably served as the royal palace. The palace was surrounded by high walls made of mud brick. Interestingly, they found a collection of tools used in construction throughout the site. This shows that the workers likely lived at the site while working on the various constructions. They also found various vessels and fragments of vessels throughout the site, which suggests that part of the palace complex might have been used for storage. Archaeologists suggest that Hierakonpolis was probably an important trade center, so the rulers would receive goods from all over Egypt and store them here. The earliest structures built in Hierakonpolis date back to around 4000 BC, but these buildings were constructed using sun-dried mud bricks. Later, around 3800 BC, the Egyptians learned how to make bricks from baked clay. This innovation makes the buildings more durable, allowing them to last longer. They used this method to build the palace and other public buildings. Meanwhile, the common folk built their homes from sun-dried bricks. During the reign of Narmer, Hierakonpolis became the capital of United Egypt, bearing the name of Memphis. It was also the capital of the first dynasty. Eventually, the kings moved the capital further north to the Giza Plateau. By the end of the fourth dynasty, Memphis lost its importance and eventually became a village. The discovery of animal bones in Hierakonpolis revealed that the inhabitants kept cattle, sheep, goats, gazelles, baboons, and even domesticated fowl. Archaeologists found houses with courtyards, indicating that families lived in nuclear families, each consisting of a male, female, children, and perhaps a few elderly relatives. They had rectangular rooms with benches along the walls instead of chairs. Houses were usually dark and narrow, lit only by a small opening above the door. Sometimes these openings were decorated with colored plaster, creating an interesting design element. Some of these houses had windows, a luxury not enjoyed by most ancient world civilizations at the time. The size of the house depended on the status of its owner. Wealthy merchants could afford larger homes with more rooms. Common folk lived in simple homes, typically with just one room. There were also neighborhoods consisting of single-story buildings divided into small rooms. These neighborhoods appear to have been designated for poorer residents. Archaeologists have discovered a variety of tombs throughout the city. Those buried in the royal necropolis were given sarcophagi made of wood or stone. Meanwhile, the common folk were buried in shallow graves covered with a flat stone. Richer individuals who could afford it were mummified. During the Middle Kingdom, the practice of mummification became widespread, but at the time it was still uncommon. As we move towards the late pre-dynastic period, people began to bury their dead with more valuable items. This demonstrates a growing concern with the afterlife. Throughout the city, archaeologists have discovered the remains of full-size granaries and small stores. These buildings indicate that the economy of Hierakonpolis was stable and prosperous. As mentioned earlier, Egyptians developed the skill of making pottery during the pre-dynastic period. These early works of art were created using a slow, laborious technique. First, they would make the shape of the vessel using a rudimentary wheel. Then, they would decorate the surface using simple geometric patterns. After decorating the vessel, they put it in a primitive kiln heated with wood to bake the vessel. Over time, they refined the process and the pottery became more refined. Some of the vessels discovered in Hierakonpolis date back to the late pre-dynastic period and are true works of art. They also discovered several workshops where they produced various tools, knives, axes, and adzes. Ancient Egyptians lived along the Nile River and were therefore excellent sailors. They crafted boats from the reeds that grew along the riverbanks. Boats played a vital role in their daily lives, serving both practical and ceremonial purposes. At the time, transportation was primarily done using boats. They were essential for trade, communication, and travel. In addition, Egyptians used boats for fishing and hunting. Perhaps the most exciting discovery in Hierakonpolis was the Nama palette. This artifact is undoubtedly one of the most important pieces of art from ancient Egypt. Unfortunately, much of the palette's artwork has worn away due to erosion. However, what remains depicts some of the most important symbols of Egyptian civilization. The main figure is depicted wearing the crown of Upper Egypt and holding a scepter in his left hand and a whip in his right. He stands next to a bull, which symbolizes strength and power. Below him, we see the head of a cow representing Lower Egypt. The scene on the other side shows the king smiting an enemy, symbolizing the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under one ruler. On either side of the king are two figures holding up his royal car. The palette was probably used as a cosmetic dish, a piece of art, and a symbol of authority. Another impressive discovery was the mace head of King Nama. The artifact was found broken into two pieces and is now housed in the British Museum. It depicts King Nama wearing the crown of Upper Egypt. He holds a flail in his right hand and a papyrus plant in his left. The plant represents Lower Egypt. The piece of art demonstrates the artistic skill of ancient Egyptians. They sculpted the muscles of the king's body with great precision, as well as the folds of his linen kilt. Another important discovery was the ivory panel from Khufu's pyramid. It is currently in the British Museum. Although its purpose is unknown, it probably belonged to a larger work of art. One side of the panel depicts a seated scribe, and the other shows the back of a man wearing a leopard skin. The panel bears hieroglyphic inscriptions showing that the scribe belongs to King Khufu, the second pharaoh of the 4th dynasty. The man wearing the leopard skin is probably a Nubian, an ethnic group native to present-day Sudan. The inscription indicates that he was a slave belonging to the royal palace. I hope you enjoyed this brief glimpse into the lives of the ancient Egyptians during the pre-dynastic period. If you want to learn more about ancient Egypt, be sure to check out my other videos. I cover a wide range of topics from archaeology to history to mythology. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.